But I think for now we are going to talk about the cover-up. And I think, again, I'm going to go a little bit back in history to, again, about September last year, because we had this character who goes by the name of Dane Wigington, and he runs a website called geoengineeringwatch.org, a little bit of a mouthful, but what geoengineering is it's basically engineering the weather. It's to do with changing the weather using artificial means, and there's a lot of talk of this now. It's maybe not something that's come up on Ralph's program very much, but I have a particular interest in it. I've had an interest in it since 2004. And people talk about chemtrails and things related to that. Are the two related? Are geoengineering and chemtrails related? Some say absolutely yes, but then again some people say absolutely there were bombs in the World Trade Center, and we now know that that's almost certainly not true. There were explosions, but there were no bombs, as I understand it. So with geoengineering, we have to again look at the evidence, which Dane Wigington doesn't seem to have done a very good job of, because it came to my attention back in, I think it was September when was it? It was, I think September the 27th, that Dane Wigington had a certain guest on, a guest who's been on this program too, Mr. Richard Gage. And what I'm going to try and do here is I'm going to play a 2-minute clip of Mr. Wigington speaking to Mr. Gage, and I think you should be able to understand quite quickly why I'm playing this clip. So I'm just going to fiddle with my settings here for a minute, and you should hopefully hear this in a moment.
With the whole 9/11 issue from bottom to top, again, there is really nothing that supports the official story, and everything supports the conclusions that your group, and again, how could you have a stronger group than that? 2,200 people, and I know there's a lot of disinformation. We talked about this off the air. A lot of people that want to grab at straws, and they grab it. I've seen information, the laser beams from space, and all this sort of stuff that is simply designed to make people reject the actual facts. We see the climate engineering of people trying sorts of fringe things and to cloud the issue, the disinformation. But in this case, when you have 2,200 plus architects and engineers signing their credibility, how could you have any more weight than that? And so I hope people that have heard lots of other peripheral that have confused them, look at 11 A&E. That's the nuts and bolts facts that really cannot be argued in any way, shape, or form. So on this, Richard, I know that some of these other theories that appear to have been thrown out there for this clouding issue, right? But they're not really making progress with that. I mean, I think you guys have really gained the lion's share of credibility and attention.
Well, I think so, and that's because we're looking at it scientifically. Regarding Judy Wood and her theory of directed energy weapons, what she does at the site around the towers and tries to try to support an unusual theory that she doesn't even know what evidence would support that theory, because we don't know anything about directed energy weapons or how they work. We don't even know if they exist. We know they're experimental programs. But in the process, what Judy Wood does is deny the scientific forensic evidence that we do have for nanothermite, which we haven't even discussed yet on this call, but it's small red gray chips of high-tech nano by an international team of scientists led by Neil Tarek in Copenhagen, which nanothermite should not be found in the World Trade Center dust.
Okay, so what you heard there was Dane Wigington, who runs geoengineeringwatch.org, talking to Richard Gage. who run...
About laser beams from outer space, and they think that discredits their movement. Well, then why is he talking about it?
Right, and I just want to point out here something very simple initially. What I've done there is I've played a clip from Dane Wigington and Richard Gage. I've actually played the clip, so you can hear what they actually said. You will never hear Richard Gage in any of his presentations playing clips of what Dr. Judy Wood actually says, right? He will misquote her. He will lie about her. Now, if you go and look at my website, you will see that I have a copy of a cheque signed by Richard Gage, drawn on Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth funds, paying for a copy of Dr. Judy Wood's book, Where Did the Towers Go? You will also see on that same page a copy of the contents page from that book. And you will see that Dr. Wood's book goes through the evidence for thermite and all of those things that Richard Gage says that Dr. Judy Wood does not address. So this proves, plain and simple, Richard Gage is a liar. And Dane Wigington is a liar too. Now, it may just be that he hasn't had time to read the book, but
to make a statement, he's still lying with that statement.
Right, he's agreeing with the lies, and he's a very careless researcher, because he hasn't actually even taken the trouble to buy a copy of this book, or borrow a copy, or even ask Richard Gage to borrow his copy. I mean, they seem to be friends. Why doesn't he ask to borrow a copy and look at the contents page? Instead, he repeats this propaganda about Dr. Wood's research, which is laser beam from space. And oddly, Richard Gage sort of corrects him and says directed energy weapons, and then says they don't exist, or words similar to that.
I think what's going on there is that they said they spoke off air beforehand. Yes. I think it's so that Dane Wigington can make these statements about laser beams in space, but Richard Gage used a different word, so he can't be held accountable for it. It's plausible deniability.
Absolutely, and another thing, I've listened to that clip a few times now, but what struck me when I was listening to it just now was that he mentioned this Niels Harrit, the Danish chemist, who claimed that there were tons of thermite in the towers on a news broadcast. He has also come onto the radar screen again, I think today, hasn't he, on this other website, which we'll talk about shortly. But it's interesting that they don't mention Mr. Jonas, Stephen E. Jones. They don't mention him in that clip, and it was actually him that came out with this thermite theory in 2005.
He also came out with laser beams from space.
He did, yes. Oh, well, we're already at another break. I'm Andrew Johnson, and we're filling in for Ralph Winterrowd, who will be back next week. If you wish, you can look at my website, which is checktheevidence.com, and Dr. Judy Wood's website, which is unsurprisingly called drjudywood.com. And Dr. Judy Wood has written a book called Where Did the Towers Go?, which I recommend you try and beg, steal, or borrow a copy of. And if you read that book, you will come to understand exactly what happened to the World Trade Center on 9/11, and it will give you a new perspective on life. We may even get to talking about that aspect of it. We, just before the break there, played a clip of a chap called Dane Wigington speaking to another chap called Richard Gage, and Dr. Wood and I had discussed this before some months ago. We discussed this clip already, and I just wanted to return to that clip where Dane Wigington actually says, he says in the clip, we have one person, Dr. Judy Wood, ignoring evidence and disputing literally not just 2,200 experts, but many more when you count all these other first responders that heard explosions. One person denying who knows how many, 2,500, 3,000 experts from various fields. Which would people be reasonable in believing? Obviously you guys are standing on solid ground, nobody else is. So Dane Wigington is lying in several ways there, because Dr. Judy Wood isn't the only person doing what she's doing. We have Dr. Morgan Reynolds. He did something similar. He hasn't written a book, but he did start a court case. And then Dr. Eric Larsen, he wrote the foreword for Dr. Judy Wood's book. He doesn't get a mention by Dane Wigington, so that's also wrong. I'm being slightly facetious here, of course. And these 20 to 500, 23,000, whatever experts, that number's wrong anyway, because it's just a petition, and many of these people, we don't know what their actual qualifications are. Whereas in Dr. Wood's case, I think we do know what Dr. Wood's qualifications are. We've spoken about it a number of times on this program already. But have you got any comments on that, Dr. Wood?
No, it's except that you think about how many times my book has been peer reviewed. We're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands, orders of magnitude, more readers of my book than they have people signed up on their whatever it is petition. And so if you want to account for how many people agree with whatever, the people who've read my book, I find nothing wrong with it, except it shakes their world.
Right,
That's the only problem they have with it.
Absolutely. And one of the things, there's a couple of things I've almost forgotten to mention, but, you're presented with a false choice all the time. We talked about giving people a false choice between the official story and then Thermite or Nukes or some other story, and you were typing in Skype, weren't we? And you were saying that it's like saying, well, we just need to get people to agree that, that 3 by 3 isn't 7, and then we're okay. I don't know if you want to express that, what you were typing to me earlier on.
Let's see. Let me see if I can get back.
Because we're basically trying to draw a very simple analogy in this false choice, weren't we?
Well, like if the official story is 3 times 3 is 4, and then the truthers come out with 3 times 3 is 6. Well, that 3 times 3 equals 4 is wrong, so therefore the assumption is that 3 times 3 equals 6 must be correct. So don't listen to that idiot over there telling you that 3 times 3 is 9.
And this is essentially what's going on. It really is, and people should think very carefully about this.
Not only am I saying 3 times 3 is 9, I'm showing it 10 different ways.
You're showing the actual roots, in that calculation. Obviously, we made it facetious and simple, but in the book, you show that whole process of how you get to the answer. You don't just state it, you show it. So this is important that people realise. So, in other words, to understand that, you've actually got to go through the book. If you don't go through the book, or you don't go through the videos that have been done and everything, you won't get it. You won't understand it. And this is very important that people go through this process.
It isn't about the answer.
No,